Okay, so as you saw, I'm starting to tear down the motor for Quasi. It's that 2-liter with a busted head stud. None of this stuff really alarms me. The crank seems to be pretty doggone good, and the rods are pretty good, and they've never been replaced or undercut. So everything's still on 0-0 bearings. Now, right here is what we call a vapor blaster. Everything you just saw was cleaned with vapor blaster. Let me show you what's up. There is the bottom of the oil pan. I'm going to put it in the vapor blaster. We're going to spend a few minutes cleaning this up, and then we're going to put it in the hot tank to remove any of the slurry that we didn't wash off in here. It's an important process to get this thing clean right after you clean it with the vapor blaster. So just watch how this goes. A vapor blaster is a emulsified air-water mix with media, certain medias. We prefer to use a ceramic bead, and this is going. And like I keep saying, excuse the noise, I got a compressor running right behind you that drives this thing. And damn it, if you don't like the noise, don't watch. Alright, and this is the magic that is vapor blasting. As you can see, that's one impressive pan. Now I'm going to run it back over to the parts washer just to get any additional slurry out of it. Okay, so this is the donated motor for Quasi. And you've probably heard us say it a few times at this point. But RTV on aluminum motors is a really, really bad idea. I don't use it, never have used it, never will use it. The motor in that car has been in there for a very long time. It does not leak, it does not have problems, and it does not have RTV. There are far better assembly processes than using this stuff. The problem with RTV is it doesn't adhere to aluminum, create that solid barrier that you want it to have. Anyway, the other part of it is if you use too much of it, it secretes between the two parts that you're bolting together, and it ends up in here. What we found in disassembling this today is the oil passages on the bearings had some RTV sitting in it. Not cool. RTV does not adhere to aluminum enough to create an ideal barrier. So, if you're going to start stabbing at building your own motors, or you just change out water pumps or oil pan gaskets or what have you, stay away from this stuff. There are far better gasket formers out there that are not silicone based like this is. So.
All right, we're working on a 66 Spider dash right here. When we first got it, the original dash was all cracked, wasn't very eye peeling, was cracking through the old foam given away over the time of the years with the sun and whatnot getting on it. So I refoamed it, sanded it down, so that way we get as little material as possible. You don't want a big buildup on these dashes here. So I refoamed it with 1/4 inch foam, sanded it down very thin, so it still has that rigidness to it. And then I mark these numbers, reference points, because each material on the vinyl I'm going to have to sew together where it's not going to be able to bend nicely. So I sew two pieces together, and these will help me line these marks up so that way everything is sewn together real nice. And what we're kind of going for here is we're going to try a new thing here. We're going to do a double top stitch. There's three kind of stitches out there. There's French seam, a top stitch, and then a double top stitch, which kind of gives it a nice modern day look to it, but still has that classic appeal. So what I do here is I get this plastic, I lay it down on the piece, so that way you can easily transfer my numbers of reference marks to the plastic. As you can kind of see here, everything lines up, and then I'll transfer this to the vinyl, and that's what we'll sew together. And here's an example of that. Has all my reference marks on there. So that way when I put it together, each line will line up and it'll come out nice. And once again, I said what the look we're going for is this right here, this double top stitch. It's kind of different, you know, we're gonna give it a shot and see how it looks. We think it's gonna look pretty good. And what this is the material will match the stitching here. We got a red leather material going on the seats and the door cards and stuff like that. So we're incorporating the red stitching in there to bring everything to ties together.
The progress on Quasi Ti has come to almost a screeching halt, and the reason is because there's too many factors against us right now. The stud that was in the block was far worse than we thought, and plus the damage that the head had taken on getting it off of the block really didn't help us much. We put that in conjunction with the injection system isn't ready yet, and the reason that's not happening yet is because it was being built during the timeline when people are getting ready for the national convention. So too many things are kind of impacting the progress of the car, and this happens. It happens every day. Anyway, so we are here again on Saturday, and while I'm working on my GTV, doing some carburation configuring on it, Dave is continuing on working on this by getting some of the accessories out of the inside. Dave is holding us accountable that we need to stay true to form, and by that meaning that we literally just get the front end done the way we expected to do with the motor and the front end paint work, all the things that you're controlling the pace of the overall scope of work. However, the one twist we are doing on this car, once the drivetrain is taken out, is we are going to convert to hydraulic clutch system, and we'll show you how that's done. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Dave's going to continue on getting some of the stuff out of the engine bay as in preparation, because before we can commit this apron, I want to make sure that we have everything out of the inside so we can really pull the front end and have more mobility to move metal around. So with that said, that's where we're going next. So the interior of this has been stripped out. Again, this is all Dave's work, not mine. And the car is being prepared for the inside upgrades to the interior that we're doing. One thing that has been somewhat surprising, as bad as the front end is on this car, as bad as some of the typical rust parts in Supers are, is on this car, what is not bad is the floors. The interior of this car is actually in fairly remarkable shape considering how everything else is in its usual expectations, which means not good. Anyhow, so Dave's gotten all the interior out of it. Jacob is creating the new interior for it. And so we have been making progress. It might be incremental compared to what we expected, but it is happening. I'm getting enough nasty grams that we haven't produced a video in forever, so yeah, so yeah, well, you know, hey, it is what it is, right? Anyway, okay, so update on Quasi Ti. We've gotten quite a few of the parts in the development of things. One, here's the block that we pulled out of that spider quite a while ago. Now, we had a heck of a time getting the head off this because at one point in time that motor had overheated dramatically, which slightly shifted the head's shaping. Not to an unrepairable point, but most certainly to a point where it did not want to come off the block very easily. In fact, we ended up sacrificing one of the studs, which would be this one right here. So anyway, in that process, what we ended up doing is the block went out to our machine man. Our machinist had removed the rest of the stud and installed another stud. That is not an easy thing to do on these old alpha aluminum blocks. You're far more likely to damage the block than anything. So if this is something you run across in your build and you've never ran into this before, I highly encourage you to take it to somebody who can handle it for you, because what you do from that point forward can either make that block absolutely garbage or you can save it. In this case, we were able to save it. Now, so the block is the vapor blast. It's going to go back in the clean cabinet, and then the next step for this is the pistons. The pistons are going to get cut to the barrels. Here's our new amazing pistons that Centerline is developing with Wiseco. Now, obviously there are various different manufacturers of pistons out there these days. You can go with Mall pistons, you can go with CP, you can go with JE. There's a million of them out there. However, but because of the development of what we're doing with this motor, making it a lot of horsepower, but reliable horsepower that's not necessarily going to shorten the life of the motor, because as the principles go, the more performance you make out of the motor, the less likely that motor is going to last long. Okay, so in this case, we are looking for longevity, because that inaugural drive that's going to take us effectively 2,000 miles round trip, we expect it to be problem-free. Remember, that is the initial goal of this, is to develop a motor that didn't cost $1 million, that was going to be reliable, that we could drive anywhere. Okay, so those are the principles that we've always stuck with on this build, and we're going to continue to stick with this. Anyhow, with that said, Centerline has developed an amazing piston, and I cannot wait to get some dyno specs on when we're ready. So this is currently in the developmental stage. Once we are done with this, they are going to produce this piston and have it available to you. There are some very clever things that Wiseco has done with this. One, they have a relief cut right here for valve clearance. That is a brilliant move, because we tend to gravitate towards large pistons on our motors, because that's not really rendering the motor's long distance performance for, you know, it's not stressing the block much. So we tend to go with the larger valves, and we tend to go with bigger draw on the cams. We like a little more lobe and a little more duration, and those are easy, low stress to the motor upgrades in performance. So with that said, to ensure that we can get that higher compression, we're simply going for 10.5 to 1. We're not going for that exotic 11 to 1 and 12. We want to be able to start this car every time, go on down the road, and not need all those special things to do just to get the car to run like we do on race cars sometimes. Now, with that said, we are running with larger valves on the head. When we have that back over here from the machine shop, you'll see what we're doing there. But they're going to be massive, easy to do valves on the intake and on the exhaust, and we're going to have cams that are completely associated with it, and I'll tell you what's going on with that in a second. Anyway, so here are our new beautiful Wiseco pistons. Stay tuned to Centerline, because they're going to have these available for you. And these are amazing. They are a really well-made piston. You think about all the motors we've had come through here through the years, and all the fantastic engineering designs that we've had done on some of these motors. This is nice, because this isn't going to be incredibly expensive piston. This is something that's going to be manageable to most budgets, and that's what we like about this. So this is the piston they developed. It is going to be a really nice upgrade. Now, with that said, this being a 2-liter motor, this piston is slightly larger than 2 liters. So our barrels are going to make a jig, and most machine shops already have this if they've ever done alphas. We're going to make a jig, and we're going to slightly cut the barrels to fit these. These are slightly upsized. We're almost pushing for a 2.1 liter, if you will, when it's all said and done. And again, not stressing the motor and getting that longevity out of the build. Now, Quasi Ti has always been, and is still going to be, a fuel-injected car. The reason that is, fuel injection is smoother, fuel injection is far more reliable. Fuel injection, you can go anywhere, altitude doesn't matter. Fuel injection in an Alpha, when done right, is superior in every way. Don't get me wrong, calm down, Weber guy. I have Webers on all my cars, with the exception of this one. This one is going to be a West Ingram high-performance Speak of fuel injected setup. Now, obviously, these fuel injected cars don't look as sexy, if you will, as Webers do. But the trade-offs you get with fuel injection over carburation can't be argued. It just simply can't. On a street car, with a hot speaker setup, You just cannot match it with carburetors. You just can't. Anyway, so this fuel injection pump has been specially designed for our build. Ingram Enterprises will develop, design, and dyno test a system to match your application. You got to remember that. So if you ever elect to go to fuel injection, or you plan on keeping your car in fuel injection, or you want to just dispel the ignorance out there that fuel injection is not as good as carburation, talk to Ingram Enterprises. They can develop a setup that will be cams, injector, timing, the whole 9 yards. That'll be, I don't want to say necessarily plug and play, but something you or your mechanic can install relatively simply and have great performance out of that car. Far, far, far better performance than carburetors can deliver. Anyway, this one has been specifically designed for our Quasi Ti project. Now we're striving for somewhere in the area of 175 to 190 horsepower. In our engineering processes nowadays, that's not really pushing the motor all that much at all anymore. And then we have our fuel injector setup. Now, if you notice, these kind of look like levers, but they're not. So what we're going with is TWM throttle bodies with this fuel injection setup. And we're not using the steel lines that are associated with the fuel injected. We're using these really cool, high-tech, very cool looking injector setups. And as you can see, it doesn't really change the cool factor of these throttle bodies. This is going to be a really nice looking setup inside that motor. And if you also notice, the intakes on these are huge. Okay, so these are effectively about a 48 millimeter intake going into a 45, compressing into a real GTA manifold body. The GTA manifolds are slightly different than the traditional 1600s. The tapering on the intake angles is a little bit different. So transitioning from our massive 48 horns into our 45 throttle bodies, into the 45 intakes, crushing down into this setup is going to give us a lot of really good torque, and we don't need a whole lot of complicated formulas on our setup to make this thing work. Now, this is essentially what we're going to have. So if you were to notice, it would be effectively simple enough like that, a clean setup, the speaker will be down below, everything's going to have that raw 60s look more or less, but with some serious high-tech fancy. And there's your Quasi Ti. Sorry it's taking so long, but we're back.